And if you have done the right research, you are going to know the right questions to ask, and you're going to know what pains are going to resonate with your customer.
Hello and welcome to the Vigilante Leverage Show. I'm Matthew Bergvinson.
And I'm Lukas Ng.
And Lukas, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about pitching and asking questions and when to do both of them, I think.
Or neither.
Or neither, yeah. Sometimes you just have to shut up and listen.
Yeah.
I think the context and the nuance of when to do which one is very subtle. And I think to start off, we'll be kicking it off about external sales. That's the starting point, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. But I don't know, from a sales context, what are your first thoughts and when to pitch, when to ask questions, and how to do each of those?
I think it's really contextual, but I mean, that's why we run this podcast, right? Is to talk about a whole different context and how things play out in different environments. So one thing that I think about a lot is when you're dealing with a really sophisticated market, if you don't have your pitch dialed in, people are going to be looking at you like, okay, you don't even understand the problems of my industry. I've got a lot to do. Can you just get out of my way? So I think that some degree of preparation is always necessary, and a pitch will at least demonstrate some competence and knowledge and help you, even get to the asking questions point. Whereas in a less sophisticated market, you can get away with a lot more questioning because they don't have a team of 50 people all working on this problem under them, trying to get it solved. So it's a different context.
It makes me think of our other episode about the myth of the silver-tongued salesperson a little bit. When I think about like pitching and question asking and like how to sell and stuff, or whether it's internally or externally to customers or internal stakeholders, I feel like the simplest thing to do is, like you had just said, do the research ahead of time and map things out. And if you have done the right research, you are going to know the right questions to ask, and you're going to know what pains are going to resonate with your customer, again, whether it's internal or external. And that will help guide the initial pitch and help guide the question asking. And the reason I feel like people just struggle in general is because they haven't done that research. And that research, I think, can come from, let's say you're pitching like a Fortune 500 company. It could come from reading the 10Ks, listening to the quarterly earnings reports, and trying to figure out what's relevant with LinkedIn research and Googling and ChatGPT or whatever you're using to do research, right? But yeah, you could also gather some of that information by asking some of the lower level employees and seeing, hey, how do you feel about this? How are you thinking about this thing? What is a problem for you around this area? And the combination of all of that gives you very rich research into, like you had said, tailoring the pitch a little bit. And for me, I think that once you've delivered a pitch that sparks intrigue, then it's just about, all right, why did you want to talk? What about what I said was relevant to you? And then it's just about following up and asking questions and active listening. That's how I approach it personally.
Yeah, when you are, for your larger enterprise deals, when you're working on getting your pitch together, what are some of your go-to resources that inform how you construct your pitch, and then what specifically goes into it?
That's a good question. I think that I have to come with like a point of view and an opinion first. So I know that like if I don't work in consumer packaged goods, or if I don't work in manufacturing and I'm trying to pitch someone in those sectors, I probably shouldn't have a point of view to start with. And I have a product or a service that does something that I think that I can help this industry, but I want to test that, right? So I'll do some research around those industries just generally. What do they care about from a high level? Like, what does the CEO care about? And how is that all going to trickle down to the different sectors in which my product or service is actually going to be able to assist them, or whatever it is that I'm trying to sell them or something. And then I'm going to start to develop a point of view on how I think I can help a specific section of their organization or company. I think that a lot of people say, oh, I can serve all of the Fortune 1000. I'm like, no, you can't. No, you can't. Because if you can serve all of the Fortune 1000, then you're selling Salesforce, or you're selling cloud services, or you're selling something that is so broad that it can apply to all these places. But they didn't start by selling it to everyone. They started by targeting who is going to be most relevant and who's it going to be interesting for and who's it going to help the most. And they use that as a platform to expand. So I think about these enterprise deals in the sense of, let's figure out who we can help the most and who we can help the best. And within there, specifically, who are we actually going to be making the most impact for? Is it someone in IT security? Is it somebody on the manufacturing line? Is it somebody who is pressing the buttons in a nuclear power plant? Like, who am I specifically going to help? And then I'm going to research everything I can about what that person does day to day and how what I do is going to benefit them. And then I try to think about it upstream to their manager and their manager's manager and their manager's manager's manager, and then eventually all the way up to the CEO. How are all of these things going to be impacted, and how are they thinking about my product or service from that lens? And that really helps me crisp down my pitch to hopefully a paragraph or less. Like, it should be something that when someone reads it in an email or when someone says it out loud, they're just like, yes, that is relevant for me. Yes, I need to hear more. And at that point, then you can just shut up, kick up your feet, and just say, tell me more.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting too, because, if you go through the multi-tiered management, sometimes you find out the incentives don't actually align all the way up. And so you're trying to figure out, like, okay, who needs what at what level? And how can I get everyone to play nice? Because that doesn't happen all the time in larger orgs. A fun thing for me, if you're looking at the C-suite level, is like, okay, so what are the, for publicly traded companies, it's really obvious because, it's knowledge that's out there. But looking at what is really relevant to the C-suite, because it might not always be the things that middle and lower management are directly asking for and want.
What are some examples of conflicts that you might come across between upper level management, lower level management, and the individual contributor level?
Well, upper is often, hey, move the stock price. If you move the stock price, you get incentives. But things get so diluted by the time you get down to the individual contributor level. They're just trying to have a less crappy day at work. They just want the means to get their job done. I think a lot of people actually do enjoy their work when it's not purposely made a pain in the butt to do. And that's what they want. And people in middle management, they want things that are, to let their individual contributors do their job, and more specifically, let them do it pretty seamlessly so that middle management can actually kick back a little bit instead of having to put out fires on a consistent basis. But then as things trickle up, it seems to get a little bit more amorphous. And oftentimes when I'm talking to the C-suite, it's like, well, okay, we just want to increase the stock price. And it's not necessarily just moving the bottom line around. It's, what sort of accounting trips can we use to move things around, or what's, what can we slash in the short term that's going to have gains that look good on paper? What's, what does the street want, but not necessarily what do my middle managers want, and almost certainly not what do my individual contributors want.
That's actually a really interesting question of the executive motivation, whether, if you have a publicly traded company, they're kind of thinking about what they promised to the street and what the street wants, as you had mentioned. And privately held companies obviously have different motivations. But I feel like also executive tenure is going to impact what initiatives they might have. And I know that, we're saying, CEOs in general, or CTOs in general, or CFOs in general. And while I think they have general directives that are same, I feel like you have some very differing personalities based on what company you have, how successful they are, how smart those executives are in the first place, whether they're long-term or short-term.
Was this person brought in as a turnaround CEO?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you have a new CEO that's in place for 2-3 months, they're probably trying to some very interesting transformative moves. They're thinking about moving the needle in ways that people haven't before. They're probably open to something that's going to be very different than business as usual. But if you have a CEO that's been there for 15 years, not saying that they're not open to that, but they're probably more interested in iterative improvements based on what they know is working in their long-term strategy, unless there's a very specific directive they have for transformation. So I feel like, it's going to be very different.
Yeah, and I feel like for the most part, you have sold products that are more in the transformative category, more so than in the iterative category.
That's probably true.
Is that correct?
Yeah, there are some.
I think it leans that way, at least.
It certainly does. I mean, there are certainly some.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leading this a little bit. I'm wondering, do you find it easier to sell those transformational deals to people that have been in their role for a year or less? Or do you find it easier to do the transformational deals on, hey, you've been stuck for 12 years, what do you need to actually change things?
That's a really good point.
What have you found persona-wise in terms of tenure?
I think there's 4 groups of people here. First group is you have your first set of you have a matrix, which is your tenure and your willingness to innovate. And so I feel like you do have people in the long term that are willing to innovate. Like you said, stuck in a rut, they need to change things, or maybe they're just a perpetual innovation machine. And that CEO just always wants to innovate. And so those are always fun to talk to. And you can really tell that based on news clips. How much press are they doing? What are they announcing about new initiatives? What are they excited about? Are they going to be jumping on the next big thing and testing it all the time? Or are they just going to be, are they somebody who kind of stays out of the news and their company is mostly business as usual until all of a sudden every executive leaves all at once? I think those are telltale signs. So it's hard for me to say that maybe an earlier tenure or a lesser tenure executive would be more interested in innovation from an outside party, because they certainly are interested in transforming and innovating. But I think a lot of executives, when they're coming into that role outside from an outsider's perspective, they're coming in with a very specific point of view and a very specific way that they want to execute upon that point of view. And unless what you are coming in as somebody who's trying to consult with them or sell them a product or a service, unless you are fitting within that transformational narrative that they have already set in place in their heads, you might not have a shot at it. And so that's where I kind of hesitate a little bit to answer that, simply because there's so much about the individual person in that role that's going to dictate it. And oftentimes somebody from the outside might not be able to pivot the course of their main strategy if you don't fit in the strategy already.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if someone's come in and they've, especially if they've pitched a board already on, hey, I'm the person for the role because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z that are damn well tie into X, Y, and Z and have nothing to do with the other 23 letters of the alphabet. So, yeah, that makes sense.
I like your comment about the board there. I feel like that is very representative of the realities. CEOs and CIOs and CFOs and stuff, they often get hired based on what they're planning to do. And so it's got to fit within what they've pitched. And obviously they've thought about it quite a bit. It's not like no CEO is walking into a role for the first time, like, as a new CEO, and is just like, all right, well, I guess we'll figure it out.
I really wish someone would cold call me and just tell me what I'm supposed to do right now.
Yeah. And that's a humbling learning for myself, which is, like from the outside, you can have a very strong perspective and you might even have a really good answer, but you have to understand that these people are not dumb. They're smart and they're hired to do their jobs for a reason. And even though you might have a great outsider's perspective, there's so much insider perspective and outsider perspective that they're bringing in that maybe you don't have context of. And so maybe they are getting hired to that CEO position and you're not, for a particular reason. So you got to understand that. Doesn't mean you can't help, but you have to understand why they're getting brought in the first place.
Yeah.
Not to say that you should only be selling to the C-level, because I think a lot of people think, oh, here's my product. If I get the CEO to buy in on it, then everybody's going to buy in. But that's not how it works. Different budgets.
I used to think it was how it worked, and it was really painful to continue with that belief for a lot longer than I should have.
Transformational consulting, an innovative product line, and R&D, like that stuff is CEO worthy. I have this SaaS product that I want to sell that helps procurement cycles. The CEO could not care less. They're like, great, sounds good. Junk mail. You got to find the people who actually care about what you have, the problem that you're solving. And just because it's the CEO that likes it doesn't mean it's actually going to make it through. Enterprise deals, like you'll have 3, 5, sometimes 15, 20 plus stakeholders that need to buy off or think it's a good idea. It's not always the C-level that makes that decision.
Well, and you're a lot better than I am at managing those, stupidly convoluted. Well, to me, they're stupidly convoluted deals. You've sold multiple 9 figures worth of them, so you're probably pretty happy with those have lined your pockets. But it's for me, 20 stakeholders is just a nightmare.
It's
well, I mean, we were looking at at that deal the other day, and we had to, we were looking at like how many stakeholders minimum? It was like 18.
Yeah,
for a deal that just wasn't going to be worth the squeeze. Like for me, I'll shy away from selling it once it gets to that size. If the deal size just doesn't make sense, it's
resource allocation.
If you're looking at, I mean, I don't know where the line is for you, but if it's like less than $10,000 deal size per stakeholder, that's when the payoff just doesn't really cross into the zone of worth it for me.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up, is like, when is the juice not worth the squeeze? I think a lot of people also trade away they trade away value and actual dollars for the potential of working with a big name company, and we'll break even or we'll lose money on this in the interest of getting this customer as a logo that we can put on our website. But you have to make money, and if they don't see the value, then what's to stop them from not seeing the value in the next deal and the next deal and the next? So I feel like that's just that the lost leader idea is a fallacy that I think people need to get over. Yeah, but like with executives, like I think the pitch it's simple. It's be brief, be brilliant, be gone. And once you've done that, once you've been brilliant, once you have been brief, and once you've been gone, they're going to chase after you. And at that point, once they're chasing after you and they want to talk to you, stop selling. And by stop selling, I mean stop pitching and stop thinking that you have to tell those executives, like, here's why you need this, here's why you need that. And that's your time to sit there and listen and figure out what are their big priorities, what are their problems. They've engaged you. Executive, tell me a little bit about why we're talking. What was interesting about what I said to you? And that sounds like a stupid question to ask, but ask it. I think we talked about this before. Ask the dumb questions. Ask that dumb question and see why they wanted to talk. Then listen and stop putting your agenda. Ignore your commission and your paycheck and and any profit margin from your products, and just think of them as a human being with a problem and try to understand it. And ask as many dumb questions as possible to clarify. And once you can take your head out of asking those questions, you're going to have such a great narrative.
Oh man, how many times have you prefaced things by saying like, hey, this might be a dumb question, but I feel like it needs to be asked so that we can clarify things. And then had things that were totally surprising come out of it.
Every single time I talk with anybody that I'm trying to sell on something or that I'm trying to understand, I do the same thing. And sometimes I don't even preface it as eloquently as that. I'm just like, all right, dumb question. Why are we talking? Dumb question. What do you mean by performance? This is going to be a dumb question.
Yeah.
But how are you measuring that? This is a dumb question. What does that acronym mean to you? Is it what I think it means, or is it something different?
Oh, God. Yeah. Acronym soup. That's a special one.
Acronym soup is not the kind of soup I want to drink. It's a soup that everyone drinks, though. And I think it's funny because the people are afraid of looking dumb. I want to be the dumbest person in the room. Because if you're the dumbest person in the
I've been in meetings where like there were at least two factions that each thought that the acronym that was being discussed and referenced the entire meeting meant totally different things.
And then no one clarifies it because no one wants to look dumb. But the dumber you look, the smarter you look, actually. And that's it's somewhat oxymoronic to say that, but it's true. And there are people who have scoffed when I've asked the dumb questions. But when the people are scoffing because you're asking the dumb questions, that's actually a strong indicator that you're in front of the wrong people. And stop pitching, stop asking questions, and figure out, instead of pitching and asking questions around their initiatives, figure out who is making the decisions. Because if somebody thinks you're dumb for asking questions like that, it means that they actually have no idea the larger context of what you're trying to understand, and they're not going to help move the needle for your decision. Or they could just be a crappy person, and then why would you want to work with them anyway? So it's a win-win.
Yeah. If you're just talking about the right things, people will entertain all sorts of questions if you're really hitting on the things that are relevant and important to them. Like, I've been surrounded by agricultural scientists my whole life, and yet I don't really know a whole lot about agriculture. But when I ask questions that I know are really, really basic, like getting, different like carbon or like nitrogen fixation processes explained to me for the 14th time, the right people will get really excited about answering that again.
By the way, do you
especially if they've learned something since the last time you talked to them about it.
Can you tell me about nitrogen fixation at this point, or whatever that was? You don't have to.
No, I still can't. I forget about it every time because it always ends up being just a precursor to nitrogen fixation is important. We need more nitrogen availability. And then it leads into, and we're using this ag tech solution to deliver it. And then it becomes, how do we, develop that product? And I'm like, okay, I don't really need to understand the science. I need to figure out how to help you get this thing to market.
That's also actually,
I don't know. There's a lot of knowledge that I hold temporarily, right? There's things that I just hold in my brain for a hot second because I'm like, okay, I do need to understand the science so that I can engage with the right people for the next 6 weeks while we're working on this initiative. And then after that, I don't need that little science bit anymore. And it goes out the window and it gets replaced by whatever the next thing is that we're working on. I hold on to the people skills all the time, but I definitely, like, hard skills come in and out of my brain super fast. I pick them up and I put them down because I've only got so much room for that kind of knowledge.
And you need it with
and it just needs to be cyclical. Yeah, and I can like pick it up again pretty quickly, but it's, there's some things that you need to memorize and some things that you just need to know how to reference efficiently.
That reminds me. I'm actually going to, as you know, I'm getting re-licensed and recertified for my like the Series 65, Series 7 and stuff. And so I just walked in cold. Yeah. It's been 10 years. Wait, what year is it? 2023. It's been 8 years.
You're gonna make us sound old, Lucas.
I think I got licensed for my Series 7 and 66 like 8 years ago, and so I just walked in cold, took the practice exam, and passing grade 72%, and I got like a 60, 65, and I'm like, wow, I have forgotten a lot of this stuff. But I think that's just the nature of the bees. You do forget a lot of stuff if you don't touch it for years. So I think that you probably hold at least as much hard facts in memory as most people.
Yeah, I do. They're just scattered. Or they're never relevant. I can't tell you how many times I've just like wandered around on Wikipedia being like, ooh, but this like particular species of, marsupial has these traits, and that's really fascinating. And I will never need that knowledge at all.
Good night, sir.
As long as no American pop culture pre-2008 is referenced, I do pretty well at trivia.
So I personally am.
Otherwise, I just correct, it's the immigrant ignorance over here, and that's just the card that I've got to play.
Honestly, at least you have that card to play. I don't keep track of anything that is relevant for trivia at all. So I am literally the worst person to take to trivia. I don't think I've ever gotten a single answer right. That wasn't broadly known by everybody in the bar, because trivia almost always is at a bar. But one thing that I've been really thinking about is how to ask the right questions, and not that I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do that, but it's a skill of itself. I think a lot of people focus so much on the pitch and getting the pitch right, but I think that the words don't matter so much as the fact that you have done the research ahead of time and the words come out. But then when asking questions, this is where I think a lot of people fall flat. They ask questions just like, does this sound interesting to you? And that's a yes or no question. Where are you going to go with a yes or no question? And if the person's generous and kind, they'll say, yeah, I think this is interesting. I'll tell you why. But they're not going to volunteer that. So you ask questions like that. It's like, is this interesting to you? Okay.
Yeah, you just walk yourself right into a dead end. I mean, what do you do with that? Is this interesting to you? No.
You're like, oh, okay.
Please, sir, could you be interested?
And so, I think that better questions that allow like active listening or active engagement are things just like, well, how do you do this today? How would you use this in your process if you were to use this? What is the problem right now with your existing process? How much are you trying to cut your operational expenditures by, and why? Like, who's telling you to do that? Or why is it important for you to do this sort of thing? Those why and how questions, and sometimes even what questions, are so useful to opening those doors and helping people just really spill their guts and tell you what is it that is such a problem, and why are they talking to you in the first place? But it's so easy to prescribe and just ask yes or no questions and be like, all right, cool, perfect. Now I know what the issue is. All right, yes, you said you'd use this. All right, great. Let me tell you exactly how you can use it in your process. I have never done that, ever, to sell anything. And usually when it's done correctly, I feel that I have contributed by helping them just speak their mind and kind of explain things out loud. And they basically convince themselves of why they need what you have to offer if there's a fit. And sometimes there's not a fit.
Yeah, if there's a fit, yeah.
If there's not, then...
Yeah, I think presupposing a fit probably leads to more wasted time than just about anything.
And you piss them off. And then you lose the relationship, too.
Yeah, you piss people off, you lose the relationship, but I mean, just from like a sales efficiency standpoint, when you assume a fit and you're like, oh, no, I've got to spend all my time on like this prospect because I feel like there might be a deal there because they said they were interested that one time. I think that's what newer salespeople spend like 80% of their time on, is bad fit, but they don't know how to disqualify.
Not even newer salespeople. I'd venture to say a lot of tenured salespeople do that. A lot of ones who basically, the phrase that I hate is selling ice to an Eskimo, things like that. Why would you sell ice to an Eskimo? Like, maybe they have a purpose for it, and maybe you can uncover that. But if they don't need it, then why would you sell them ice? I would never sell them ice. And presupposing a fit, as you said, is doing just that. You're assuming that your ice is the best ice ever, and there's not a single soul on earth that couldn't benefit from the ice. Well, there maybe is someone who doesn't need to benefit from it. And in that case, you gotta get rid of them and move on. You're wasting their time and you're wasting yours. And then if you do shove your product down someone's throat by pure perseverance and pure willpower, are they going to be happy a year from now that they bought from you? The answer is going to be no. And you can say, oh, well, you could give them value, but the whole point is the value is not there in the first place. You're forcing someone to do something, and no one likes that. It feels bad. The pitch, the asking questions.
Bad for renewals. It's bad for reputation. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, one of these days we'll do a whole one. Yeah, I mean, today we're kind of rambled a little bit, but we were talking about when to ask questions and when to pitch. We spent a lot of time talking about pitching. I think we could do a whole series on questions, really. I mean, I think disqualification questions and methods in and of itself is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I mean, definitely something that I've struggled with over the years, where it's been like, oh, it is so alluring when somebody tells you that maybe there's a chance, and especially if you really need that commission check coming, to really convince yourself that a deal exists where it doesn't.
I think let's just summarize it for everybody, just to make sure that we're super clear on kind of how we think about this. So the pitching, it should not happen right away. You should do lots of research to understand what is the relevance for this person that you're going to pitch, and like, how do you really tailor that down to just a couple sentences? And if you can't, just use ChatGPT and take all of the stuff that you talked about in research and all the relevance and say, condense this down to 3 sentences. It will help you with that. It's okay. It's a great tool to use. And then that's your pitch. And once you've done that, no more pitching. No more pitching. You don't need to. Just ask the questions. And then from there, you can make your next pitch that's going to be even more tailored. But basically, it should be really 70% listening and 30% talking. And those questions, how and why questions. Start those questions with how and why, and you will win. That's my summary.
Nice recap.
Did I miss anything?
I think that's the gist of it. Do your research, have a succinct pitch. Don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions, because the pitch is just the hook.
Exactly. The very, very first step of a lot.
The questions are the deal.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's a small customer or a Fortune 2000 company or a Fortune 10 company. It's all the same. It's all the same. And people are all the same at the end of the day.
People like to buy. No one likes to be sold.
Yeah. Well put, for sure.
All right. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap this episode up. But thank you so much for listening. I think one of these days when we've got some time, and we'll add it to the show notes eventually, Lukas and I are going to put together a complete list of our favorite questions for getting people to open up, getting people to, the struggles that they're facing, and how they're proceeding to search for solutions, and so on and so forth. We should put a question.
That's a great idea.
That's something that will be added to the show notes. Hopefully by the time you listen to this, we'll have added that. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Yeah, this is the Vigilante Leverage Show. I'm Matthew Bergvinson. And as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.